By the time Elias Hart found the woman he had paid to marry, she was blue-lipped, barefoot, and using a cedar seed box as a pillow. The contract said she was supposed to arrive in September. It was the last week of December. Snow had sealed the Blue Mountain Pass for 3 days, and Elias had only gone out because his goats were bawling at something beyond the spring house. He carried a lantern in one hand and a rifle in the other. He expected a cougar. Instead, at the edge of the timber, half buried beside an overturned freight sled, he found a young Japanese woman curled around the lacquered cedar chest, as if the box were the last warm thing left on earth. For a long second he did not move. He had stopped expecting her months ago. The agency in Portland had taken his money, sent one thin letter, and promised him a wife who could keep house in a hard country. When no woman came, Elias told himself he had been cheated. Then he told himself he deserved it. A man who sent for a stranger because he was too tired to be alone had no right to complain when the world ignored him. But the woman in the snow was not an idea anymore. She was real. Her hair was frozen to her cheek. Her travel kimono had torn at the hem. One hand was locked around the brass latch of the chest so tightly he had to pry her fingers free. Elias knelt and pressed 2 fingers below her jaw. Nothing. He leaned closer. Then he felt it, a tiny pulse, stubborn and uneven, like a match refusing to die in the wind. He cursed under his breath, but it came out almost like a prayer. "You are 3 months late," he said. Then he lifted her from the snow and carried her toward the rough yellow light of his cabin. Her name was Hana Moriyama, though Elias did not learn how to say it properly for almost a week. When she woke, she was inside a one-room cabin built of pine logs and black river stone. Her feet had been wrapped in wool. Her wet clothes hung near the hearth. A stranger with a weather-cut face sat at the table, shaving curls from a broken axe handle with a knife. The first thing Hannah saw was the blade. She tried to sit up and failed. Her lungs burned. Her throat felt packed with ash. The man looked over. He did not smile. He did not comfort her. He simply set the knife down, poured broth into a tin cup, and placed it in her hands. "Drink," he said. She drank because pride could wait until after survival. Only when the warmth reached her stomach did she whisper, "Where am I?" "My place," he said, "near the South Fork of the Wallowa. Another night outside, and I would be burying you." She understood only half the words, but she understood the room. A widower's room. Work without order. Grief without sound. Tools left where they fell. A cracked basin. Ash tracked across the floor. No woman's touch, and no child's noise. "Notice it. The paper said you spoke English," he said. "Some. The paper said September." "I know." He waited. Hana looked at the cup in her hands. She remembered the ship, the rail delay in San Francisco, the fever checkpoint, the wagon driver who abandoned her luggage when the mountain road vanished under snow. She remembered walking until her feet stopped feeling like her own. "Road closed," she said. "Men left me. I walked." Elias's jaw tightened. Maybe at the men, maybe at her. It was hard to tell. He looked toward the cedar chest by the door. "You would not let go of that box." Hana turned her head so fast it made the room spin. "My family," she said. He nodded once, untouched. That was the first mercy between them. The next days were made of small humiliations. Hana hated needing help to stand. She hated coughing until her eyes watered. She hated wearing Elias's spare trousers, hacked short and tied at her waist with rope. But she had crossed an ocean to live, not to lie under blankets like a broken doll. On the fourth morning, while Elias fed the goats, she opened the cedar chest. Inside were things no one in that mountain valley would have understood. A packet of bitter melon seeds wrapped in oiled paper, a narrow abacus, 2 brushes, a silk wedding robe folded around a book of remedies written in her grandmother's hand, and a small cloth bundle of dried herbs that still smelled faintly of summer rain. Hana touched the book and felt the first stab of homesickness sharp enough to steal breath. Then she closed the chest. Grief could wait too. The cabin needed hands. She began with the floor, then the basin, then the shelf where salt, beans, flour, nails, and lamp wicks had all been thrown together as if tomorrow were an insult. She lined up the tools by use. She counted the stores. She mended a blanket with thread pulled from the inside seam of her robe. Elias watched from the doorway the way a wounded animal watches a fire. He did not thank her. But he stopped leaving his boots in the middle of the room. At supper, a week later, after eating a bowl of barley stew she had stretched with dried mushrooms from her chest, Elias said, "My first wife left because she said the silence here had teeth." Hana kept her eyes on the spoon. "Did she?" "Died before she could." His voice flattened. "Cholera, back east. Her and the boy." The cabin seemed to shrink around those words. Hana lowered the spoon. "In my village," she said carefully, "we say a house can keep sorrow like smoke." Elias looked at her for a long time. "This house has plenty." "Then it needs windows." For the first time, one corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile, the ghost of one. Outside, winter deepened. Inside, their arrangement became something with rules neither of them had spoken. Elias rose before dawn and tended the goats. Hana cooked, cleaned, rationed, and learned the sounds of the mountain. The warning crack of ice in the rain barrel, drift of snow sliding from the roof, the different bleats of hungry, frightened, and sick animals. One evening Elias came in with his face pale beneath the beard. "The black nanny is down," he said. "Fever. If it spreads, I lose the herd." The goats were not pets. Hana understood that quickly. They were food, milk, barter, future. They were the difference between a homestead and a grave with walls. Elias took her to the shed. The sick nanny lay on her side, eyes dull, breath rattling. Hana knelt in the straw and placed her palm behind the animal's jaw. Heat pulsed under the hide. "I can help." Elias stared. "With what?" "Plants." "It's December." "I saw willow at the creek before the snow, yarrow near the black rock. I need bark, root, leaves." "You can barely walk in this weather." "I walked here dying," she said. "I can walk there living." He wanted to refuse. She could see it. But the nanny's breath dragged like a saw through wet wood. So Elias gave her his heaviest coat, tied rope around both their waists, and took her into the white world. The cold slapped tears from her eyes. Snow climbed her knees. Twice she fell. Twice she rose. At the creek, she scraped bark from a willow branch with numb fingers while Elias hacked at the frozen bank. Near the basalt outcrop, she dug until the spade sparked on stone, then found the dry crown of yarrow under packed snow. Back in the cabin, she boiled, crushed, strained, and forced the bitter liquid past the animal's clenched teeth. She rubbed the chest with a poultice that smelled sharp and green. Elias watched, desperate enough not to mock what he did not understand. "What do you call it?" he asked. "Medicine. For goats? For anything that wants to stay alive." For 2 nights, Hana slept on a sack beside the shed door. On the 3rd morning, the black nanny stood, wobbled, and began chewing hay. Elias looked from the animal to Hana. This time he said the words, "Thank you." By spring, the valley remembered how to move. Snow broke into gray slush. The South Fork swelled. Mud sucked at boots. The road reopened, and with it came Gideon Calder. He arrived on a black horse, wearing a town coat too fine for mud. Elias stiffened before the man even reached the porch. Calder smiled at Hana as if she were furniture he might appraise. "So the paper bride survived," he said. "I wondered if Portland had sent you a wife or a funeral bill." Elias stepped down from the porch. "State your business." "My business is water." Calder removed one glove, finger by finger. "The county clerk accepted my filing on the upper ditch. Your spring drains toward my meadow. That makes it part of my system. It has watered this place since before your fence touched the valley. Then you should have filed better." Hana stood just inside the door. She understood the words filing, water, my. She understood the rest from Elias's shoulders. Eyes slid back to her. "Careful, Hart. A foreign woman and a handful of goats will not help you hold land a real ranch can use." After he rode off, Elias remained in the yard, fists closed. "He can do that?" Hana asked. "He can try." But the next week, the lower creek ran thin. Elias walked upstream and found Calder's men had cut a new channel through the gravel, stealing the current before it reached Heartland. It was not illegal enough for a sheriff to care. It was not honest enough for a decent man to admit. So Elias hauled water by barrel. Hana could not match his strength, so she used another kind. She opened her abacus. She measured feed, counted milk, tracked flour, nails, lamp oil, and winter hay. She drew the spring, creek, shed, slope, and garden in a ledger with a precision Elias could not read, but could not ignore. "What's all that?" he asked one night, exhausted at the table. "A map of what keeps us alive." "It's pretty." "It is not pretty," Hana said. "It is proof." He leaned closer. For the first time, Elias saw not foreign marks, but a mind making a weapon out of order. Calder struck next without showing his face. Someone opened the goat pen after dark. By morning, 2 young kids were gone, and the snow beyond the fence was shredded with coyote tracks. Elias found the cut rope and said nothing. Silence had returned to the house, but this time it was not grief. It was rage. That night Hana laid an old quilt over his shoulders. He did not look up, but his hand found hers and held it for one breath. Only one. It was enough. The disaster came in March, not with snow, but with thaw. A warm rain fell for 36 hours on a mountain still packed with winter. The hills began to bleed. Water ran under the goat shed, through the yard, down the ruts, across the place where Hana had planned her garden. The stolen channel above them overflowed, sending Calder's diverted water back toward Heartland with the force of a broken dam. At dusk, a sound split the rain. Wood tearing. Elias ran for the shed. Hana followed with the lantern. The back corner had collapsed into mud. Goats screamed. A support post leaned, and the whole roof sagged as if the mountain had put its hand on it. Elias shoved 3 animals through the door. Hana pulled another clear by the horns. Then the hillside gave a low, terrible groan. "Elias!" she shouted. He turned just as a beam slammed down and drove him into the mud. The lantern went out. For a moment, the world was only rain, animals, and darkness. Then Elias made a sound Hana never forgot. "My leg!" he gasped. "Hana, I cannot move." There was no doctor, no neighbor close enough in that flood, no road, no law, no husband strong enough to save her now. Every life on that land had narrowed down to her hands. Hana felt panic rise, hot and useless. Then she heard her grandmother's voice from years before, calm as a hand on the back of her neck. "Fear is a guest. Do not give it the house." First, she dug Elias free. Mud sucked at his body. The beam had pinned his lower leg, and when she lifted it with a fence rail, he nearly passed out from pain. She dragged him inch by inch through water cold enough to bite bone. By the time she got him inside, blood had soaked his trouser leg. The break was ugly. The bone had torn through skin. Hana closed her eyes for exactly one breath. Then she worked. She boiled water, cut cloth, packed the wound with clean linen and willow wash, splinted the leg between 2 shaved boards. When she ran out of bandages, she took the wedding robe from the cedar chest and tore it into strips without letting herself think. Crimson silk wrapped a white man's broken leg in a cabin at the edge of nowhere. It looked impossible. It worked. Then she went back out. Rain hammered her face until she could barely see. She cut ropes, cleared fallen planks, pulled goats one by one into the cabin. She dug a trench with a hoe, then another, guiding flood water away from the spring house the way she had seen rice farmers guide mountain rain back home. She wedged stones into the channel. She used Calder's stolen current against itself, turning destruction aside by inches. For 3 days, Hana did not sleep more than a few minutes at a time. She fed animals from the dry hayloft, kept fire alive, changed Elias's dressings, forced willow and yarrow tea between his lips, pressed cool cloth to his forehead when fever tried to take him. Once, half conscious, Elias whispered, "Let the goats go." Hana leaned close. "No," He opened his eyes. "This land is all I have," he breathed. "No," she said again, "it is all we have." On the fourth morning, the rain stopped. When Peterson from the next claim finally reached the cabin on a mule, he opened the door and froze. Elias lay pale but breathing on the cot. 10 goats crowded the far wall. A trench outside still carried brown water away from the spring, and Hana, small, mud-streaked, eyes bright with exhaustion, stood over a pot of boiling cloth. Peterson removed his hat. "What in God's name happened here?" Hana wiped her hands on her ruined trousers. "The mountain came inside," she said. "I put it back out." The story traveled faster than any horse. Men who had called her Calder's little paper bride now repeated how she set a compound break, saved the herd, and diverted a flood with a hoe, river stones, and a farmer's memory from across the sea. Women came with bread, broth, and questions about fever remedies. Peterson brought his sons to rebuild the shed and stood in Elias's yard until other men joined him. By the time Calder rode down to inspect the damage he expected to find, he found 15 homesteaders waiting at the stolen channel. Hana stood beside Elias, who leaned on crutches, pale but upright. Hands was the ledger. Calder laughed when he saw it. "What is she going to do? Write me back to Portland?" "No," Peterson said. "She's going to show us where your ditch sent the flood." Hana opened the book. Page after page showed dates, water levels, feed loss, storm direction, the new cut in the gravel, and the way the diverted channel had pushed water straight toward the Hart shed. Her English was careful, but the map needed no translation. Even Calder's own hired men stared. "This is nonsense," Calder snapped. "It is proof," Elias said. "Not pretty, proof." The men dismantled the illegal cut that afternoon. They did not ask Calder's permission. They restored the old creek bed with shovels and stones, and when Calder threatened court, Peterson pointed to Hana's ledger and told him the judge could read water damage as well as any man. Calder rode away with mud on his fine boots, and no one bowing behind him. 5 years later, the Hart place looked like a different country. The cabin had a second room and real glass in the window. The goat herd had tripled. A line of terraces climbed the slope behind the spring house, each one edged with stone and bursting in season with beans, onions, feverfew, mint, and bright bitter melon vines that should not have survived a mountain winter, but did, because Hana had taught them how. People rode from miles away for her remedies. They brought flour, eggs, wool, and gossip. Children who had once stared at her now called her Mrs. Hart without stumbling. The cedar chest sat at the foot of the bed, no longer a relic of the life she had lost. It held both worlds now, her grandmother's book, Elias's land papers, the abacus, the creek map, and a folded scrap of crimson silk saved from the day she chose a man's life over a wedding robe. Elias still walked with a limp. He no longer seemed ashamed of it. "That leg reminds me when I began using my eyes," he told her once. "What did you see?" He looked at the terraces, the goats, the spring, the woman who had arrived half frozen with summer locked in a box. My wife. On an autumn evening they sat together on the porch while the mountains turned purple in the distance. The spring ran clear below them. The ledger lay open on Hana's lap, half English, half Japanese, all of it theirs. Elias took her hand. "You were 3 months late," he said. Hana smiled. "No," she said, "you were 3 months early to give up." He laughed then, a real laugh, carried over the pasture by clean, cold air. The world had tried to make her a bargain, a burden, a foreign mistake at the edge of someone else's dream. But the mountain learned her name. So did the valley. And the man who found her in the snow learned that she had not come empty-handed. She had carried a whole summer inside a cedar box. And when winter tried to kill them, she opened it.